Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the MetaManiacs Show. This is the show for and by trading card game maniacs. As always, I'm your host, Dan, and today we're joined for the first time by Kevin.
Hey everyone, glad to be here. My first episode was supposed to be last week, but we had some potential hurricane issues here in Florida, so I had to delay my first appearance, but I'm glad to be here today.
We're glad to have you. And Mike is here.
Hey, MetaManiacs, how's it going?
And we've got Jordan.
Hey everyone, how's it going?
So today, as I'm sure you saw in the title of the episode, the topic is the death of a TCG. And this is always a kind of a tricky subject because a lot of us who play anything that isn't Magic or any of the longer term Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh games, it's sort of inevitable for the majority of the games that at some point that they're just going to die. We all know it's going to happen. We get into the game knowing that it's going to happen. It doesn't make it sting any less. But it's an interesting thing to talk about because on the one hand, you have the side of the remorse for the loss of the game. On the other hand, there are some interesting things that happen with games coming back, games being continued, or sometimes you just transition to a new game and you end up feeling okay about it. So I think there are a lot of interesting angles that we can talk about today. And what I want to do is the reason we're bringing this up right now, of course, is because as many of you know, the Transformers TCG recently announced its unfortunate demise, and they, in fact, even cited COVID as part of the reason. And we brought on Kevin here to give Kevin a chance to talk about that, his feelings on the matter, and we're going to talk about a number of other TCG deaths and related scenarios. So, Kevin, I'm going to give the floor to you. Why don't you go into it?
Thanks. Unfortunately, I have a lot of experience with card games because, like Dan said, unless you're one of the big three in your Pokemon, Magic, or Yu-Gi-Oh, games usually have a, maybe 5-year shelf life if you're being generous, if you're not one of those. But and I tend to be the kind of person that likes the smaller, games with smaller communities. I don't know, whatever the reason, I just prefer them more. So I've had this happen to me a lot, and yes, very recently with Transformers, which behind UFS was my secondary game. Like, if that was the game that I played the second most, I was really into it because I've been a fan of the franchise Transformers since I was a little kid, like I'm sure a lot of people listening, people my age were. And I was really excited about it, and the fact that it was Wizards making it, somebody who put, some backing and some clout behind it. And yes, like they said in their post, COVID was definitely a big part of, I'm sure, why it led to the demise. But I think there are a lot of other issues, not COVID related, that were Wizards related, that contributed to the game's downfall. Anyone else wants to chime in?
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely true. And I guess this is something I was maybe going to go into more in the expanded episode. But one thing that is sort of a trap sometimes, and I don't mean this in any sort of disrespect towards Wizards of the Coast or anything, but in any larger company running a TCG, the bar tends to be higher for keeping that TCG in production. And it comes down to smaller TCGs by smaller companies are passion projects for sure. And it doesn't mean there aren't passionate designers and developers behind Transformers, but it means that when they're working under that larger umbrella, they have a little more of a bar to meet in order to keep the game going. And unfortunately, that means, well, you're going to have the full clout of Wizards behind advertising and pushing. I remember when Transformers released, the push at Gen Con was huge. But despite that, if they can't gather enough people to meet that bar, which will usually be a larger amount of player, larger player base that they need to see, a larger mass market presence, which was another thing that was actually mentioned in the article about just being unable to capture the mass market they were looking for, then they may fold faster than a TCG will under a smaller company who's just publishing it and is fine with making whatever amount of profit they can. So it is a tricky situation.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
Yeah, and the problem with Wizards, and this is a problem a lot of video game publishers have too, is this idea of, with Wizards, it's not making Magic money, so can it, because it's not profitable. And video game publishers have this problem a lot too. You'll see games like Rise of the Tomb Raider sell 1 million copies, 1 million plus copies, and Square Enix will turn and go, "The game was a failure because your expectations were too high and you didn't adjust accordingly." And a game like that can only sell so much. There's only realistically so much of an audience. And it's the same thing with a smaller game, a game like Transformers based on a nostalgic property. And I don't think Wizards accounted for that. I think, and yes, they did have a big push at Gen Con and a lot of events like that. But as far as general advertising for the game goes, there really wasn't that much. For the last set that came out, set 5, there was Magic advertisements in the Transformers booster packs. And it's like, don't think that's the right message to send. You're advertising your other games inside of one. And the writing was on the wall for a while. I mean, even from the beginning, we went for an entire first set with no tournament support. And they basically said, the players in the stores, you do it. And if we feel like it, we'll throw some support down the line. And it kind of started off right off the bat on a bad foot.
Yeah, and a game starting off, we were actually I was talking about this with a friend the other day, but when a game starts off and it doesn't have like a kind of an OP circuit figured out right away and the tournament support planned and the knowledge of that being out there, if all they're saying is, we'll have tournament support in like a year or something, that tends to be kind of a death knell for a game. It's just tougher because the TCG market depends on competitive players. It depends on mass market a certain amount too, but the competitive players are the pillars. And if you don't have a competition for players to join in, then they will not necessarily feel like their value is there to be in the game. Kevin, I have a question that I want to ask you before we move on to Mike and Jordan's contributions here. Have you seen any sort of plans for the future of the Transformers game developing in the community as a sort of community endeavor, like a virtual continuation or anything like that, like we see sometimes with other games?
Have seen a couple of prominent players or content creators in the community talk about doing something. And the problem I'm seeing is, as we'll talk about, when like Panini Dragon Ball Z died, there were people on the development staff that were in the community that were players as well as developers that kind of got behind that fan continuation, which gave it a sense of legitimacy. Right now with Transformers, there's like 2 or 3 separate projects going on without a lot of cohesion. And I think if we don't have that kind of one guiding force, that one, thing behind it, I don't know how well that's going to last, because it's like you can't have 3 different fan versions of the same game. So I think, and because it's Wizards and it's a big company owned by Hasbro, if things aren't done the right way, the hammer will fall, as opposed to something with like Panini, where I just really think they don't care as much, So that's kind of the problem with any kind of fan continuation going on with Transformers right now.
That is really tricky. And I remember, so this is going out to the old school card gamers who remember when the Star Wars customizable card game died. The continuation on that had to walk on eggshells. It was called the Star Wars CCG Players Community. They came together to continue with virtual set, but in working with Decipher, they had a very strict list of things they could not do. And one of that was they could never make like a new card that wasn't a virtualized version of an old card. And I think over time, some of those stipulations have loosened a little bit, and that allowed them to expand into they've done prequel era and sequel era stuff now. But and they're doing things like using cosplayers as artwork and everything in order to kind of like get away with getting artwork on there that looks Star Wars-y. But for a long time, it was very complicated to figure that out. And Star Wars, of course, is a massive license, and they certainly would be not hesitant to drop a hammer on them if they started to do things wrong. And I definitely can see that being the case with Hasbro as well. Jordan, I want to hear your contribution. Yeah, absolutely. Jordan, I want to hear your contribution to this. What do you got?
I'm taking a bit of the Phoenix approach with this discussion because
I love it.
It's helped me a lot in the past. It's kind of like right place, right time with most of the card games that have died in my experience. But I like to take a quick look at the lighter side, the life after death of a card game. When it frees up both your bank account and your time, to where you start exploring, like when you're on the hunt for something new to replace it, and you just happen to fall into like the next game that ends up being like one of your favorite games. Like for me, obviously it was a little more of like a breadcrumb trail to get into Metacross, because otherwise I wouldn't have gotten into it. But when Panini Z died, they had their next game coming out, Metacross, and we already kind of knew it was on the way a bit. And that game seemed neat. Its mechanics really roped me in, whereas I like comic book characters, but not enough to where it would like hook me directly into a new game. But since we had the mechanics outlay in front of us, like the mechanics hooked me immediately. And since DBZ had just died, now I had, the extra funding and the extra time to play a new game, and that just happened to fall in my lap. And same with UFS, actually. I was out of card games for a while, and I was just like, maybe I'll just, take a break from card games, and then went to Gen Con. They had the big Yu Yu Hakusho sign. I was like, I got to see what this is. And then I ended up buying like 6 boxes, like at that day, just because I was so hyped for it, and having the like extra time and effort. And like, it's hard to say whether I'd like it more than DBZ or Metacross, but the fact that those died, it allowed me to be open to the reception of something new, as opposed to, let's say, both DBZ and Metacross was still strong. I would have saw it and been like, I don't want another card game. I'm already playing 2. And I wouldn't know the great card game that is UFS and Universes today, because I was only receptive because my other card games have died.
Kevin, you look like you had something to add there.
I was going to say, Dan's probably thinking the same thing. Technically, Meta X isn't dead. Technically.
Yeah, technically, I'm the guy who always brings that up, too. Like, I'm always like, technically, it's not dead yet. They could tomorrow just be like, surprise, everybody, Teen Titans Go set, dropping in a month.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah. So
aliens could invade tomorrow. Who knows?
It's true. I guess to anyone who's unfamiliar, after Panini's Dragon Ball Z card game died, they started putting together a new card game called Metacross or Meta X. You can call it either one. I actually was roped in to develop for that, so I had a vested interest in it and everything. And I was proud of what we did with the game, but for a number of reasons, through I think some of the way the company handled it, it didn't pan out. But so we're talking about the death of a TCG, and they never officially announced the discontinuation of Metacross. And in fact, as we understand it, Panini is holding on to it in their sort of back pocket if they decide at some point to release it again. So it's not so much the death, but it's in a coma, I guess, and maybe it'll wake up at some point. And it's like pretty much not going to. But I guess you just hold out a sliver of hope or something. At this point, all of us have pretty much moved on though. So it is, for all intents and purposes, dead, but may, like Jordan said, as a phoenix, rise again at some point. So and Jordan, I want to just say that you made a really excellent point in that one of the most fun periods of time is when you first get into a game and it's new and exciting and fresh. And if you're sad because your game died recently, I'm with you. I've been there a million times. I get it, and it sucks and it stings. And I was heartbroken myself when Panini DBZ died. But you will have that door opening again in the future where you'll get to experience that kind of honeymoon phase with a new game again, and just enjoy playing that. And I think the best thing to do is, like Jordan said, you just go, okay, I'll have my free time again for a while. And if you're a card game fan, at some point something may just catch your eye again, and you can fall head over heels over something, and go buy 6 boxes at a convention because it seems fun, and then you have to figure out how to haul everything home and whatever, which is exactly what happened.
That's
Mike,
the worst.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, it is your turn to contribute. I know you were going to talk about Dragon Ball Z and specifically Scorzy. I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
So absolutely. So I kind of like the approach that Jordan took, the Phoenix approach. Like, absolutely. Like when a TCG game dies, like that's the first thing I did. Panini Z died, and I was at Gen Con, and I was kind of looking around for that new game, and I remember everyone's coming up to me, oh, you got to try this, you got to try this, you got to try this. And I ended up jumping into the Dragon Ball Super game because I'm like, you know what? I played Dragon Ball Z, sure, I'm going to play we'll see if these guys, let's see if Bandai can do it. Let's see how Bandai can do that. And I got into it. I absolutely love the game. But for the expanded content, just a little preview, I'll get into like why I think a TCG game dies, like what kind of thing. So if you're not a Patreon supporter, totally sign up for that, because I want to get into why I think a TCG game dies. Yeah, right.
Give us the highlights on that, Mike. Give us just what's the cliff note.
Why I think the score game died. So regarding releasing promos, like really expensive promos at tournaments, like top 64 cards that only the top 64 got. So essentially, they continue getting top 64, top 32.
Snowball effect.
I don't know what you're talking about. Champion Drill is balanced.
Yeah, it's so balanced.
There we go. Right? So that's just a preview.
One ultra rare per case.
Yeah, right. Oh no, what I wanted to get into
rates are rough.
The fan projects afterwards, which are truly inspiring. Like when the Score Z game died, this is giving away my age. Like I'm not that old, but like giving away my age. When the Score game died, like you had this fan project where they were actually the game was actually continuing and they were still releasing cards, which in turn, and this is my opinion again, you guys, but in turn I think that's why the Panini Z game actually came to be, was because of the extreme passion because of the Score game and the continuation of it on why the Panini Z game even came back. So, and then when Panini Z died, there is still Fanzy going on where they're still creating new sets, new cards, and that community.
I was in a tournament yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. It's still thriving, and it almost turns the TCG game into, and I believe Dan mentioned this in the podcast 2 weeks ago. So if you haven't seen that, totally check out that podcast. They were called LCGs, right? Is that right, Dan?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Living card games.
It turns it into almost like an LCG because now everyone has access to every card. Now the fans kind of control the rules, the erratas, the bans, and they also can control the prize support. So a lot of people, when they think, when a TCG game dies, is it really truly dead? Like if the community wants to continue on that game and continue making card support, and they can gather around that and they can come together as a community, does the game really die? And I say that about Score Z, and I'm saying it about Pan Z. I mean, it's been alive for over 15 years now, in some way, shape, or form. So I like the Phoenix approach that Jordan took. It's like, you know what? Is the game really dead? If the community wants to keep it going, is the game truly dead? So that's one of my thoughts.
Yeah, I think Fan Z is like the golden example of that.
For sure.
Yeah, I think so. Mike, that's a very poignant point to make, and I'm really happy that you brought that up. I think what I'm going to do just to wrap up the short episode here is just kind of combine what everyone said into when you're approaching a TCG dying, there's going to be a grieving process. You kind of go through the stages, but what I want you to remember is that what Mike said here is true. Is the game ever truly dead if people keep playing it? I mean, there's no more releases, but you I'll say this, you can keep playing it, and I know that it's different. It feels different to play the same game over and over again. We play TCGs because we like them evolving, but many games get fan support over time. It's actually kind of just the norm these days. As soon as a game dies, now people are like, okay, who's going to start making virtual cards? Let's keep playing. And it can be tough. It can be tough when the license is difficult to deal with, like with Transformers, or when there isn't a group to rally around, like what Panini Z had, or like what the Star Wars customizable card game had. And I wanted to put a shout out too, just on that realm of things, the Star Wars trading card game, which is the Wizards of the Coast one. Where you rolled some dice. You might remember it. A lot of people played. It came out right when Attack of the Clones came out, so they had Attack of the Clones starter sets and everything. So I know a lot of people tried it out then. But that game has a community in Europe, a group in Europe that has published sets consistently since its death with
Wow.
high quality graphic design covering every movie, Clone Wars, Rebels, Mandalorian has a set coming soon, and everything in between, some novels, some comic books, some just like this. So if you, all the sequels and everything. So if you like that game, you haven't checked that out. There are communities that exist that are putting out high quality productions. And to be fair, I think the only reason they get away with it is they're in Europe, and that maybe makes the licensing like a confusing issue to like cease and desist them or something. I don't know. Or they're just under the radar. Sometimes these fan groups just kind of escape under the radar. But there is always hope that you'll be able to find some fan cards to kind of play with, and maybe you and your buddies can agree, hey, we really like Transformers, and I kind of like what this group's doing with their fan cards. Why don't we just like print some out and play some new games or whatever? But there's also always hope that a game will just be completely reborn, which is has been happening a little more lately with, I mean, Dragon Ball Z is one of the bigger examples. This is fresh news, but just recently announced that an LCG by Plaid Hat Games called Ashes, Rise of the Phoenixborn, I believe, is the subtitle on that. It went out of production for a while, but Covenant or Team Covenant, who have grown to be a very popular similar site to ours, where they cover various games, mostly Fantasy Flight games has been kind of their main thing, but they cover a huge variety of TCGs and everything now, and big into Flesh and Blood also. They partnered with Plaid Hat to use their subscription model that they've sold LCGs to people for years, where you just subscribe and you get sent every few months the new release. They went to Plaid Hat and said, if we can guarantee you we get this many subscribers, will you print Ashes again? And they agreed, and they're working with them to rebalance a couple things and release an upgrade kit for a 1.5 version. And so that's actually something I'm looking at checking out just for fun. But if you're a fan of that game, it just got announced a new lease on life. It's not a TCG, but it's similar. It's an LCG. So, and there are rumors that keep floating around. People keep saying, will this old Star Wars customizable card game come back? Will someone print that again? If that happens, you can guarantee it'll be here on MetaManiacs, because I will be pushing it very strongly. But I'm just saying, these days, especially it's the trend in movies to redo movies from the past, nostalgia, and TCGs are starting to do that as well. Video games, Final Fantasy VII Remake, like TCGs get that too.
There's a pretty awesome TCG in Japan that's hopefully gonna maybe. I'm praying every day that it comes here.
Well,
we'll definitely be covering that.
Jordan's looking for the Digimon card game, and that is not a remake of a dead game. It's a new game, and it does look very cool. So we're hoping to cover that as well. But
yeah, it plays differently.
It's better Chrono Clash.
It is kind of very similar to Chrono Clash.
Yeah. I guess it's not really a dead card game. It's a different card game with the same IP.
You just got excited and couldn't help but throw it in. So
yeah,
I understand. But I guess that's just kind of my. Also, go ahead, Kevin.
Sorry, just one more thing to kind of piggyback off what you guys are saying about the whole Phoenix approach is that even if there isn't new fan stuff coming out, virtual stuff, if there is a player base and there's people who love a game and they want to play it, nothing can stop people from doing their own events and just, whatever. The fighting game community is the perfect example of this. There are still people who play Super Turbo, Third Strike, MVC2. It's like, as long as there are people who want to play a game, you'll be able to do it. And that's also a positive thing to think about.
Absolutely. So I guess if you're one of these affected players of Transformers dying or any other TCG in the future, or you're getting into a TCG and you're thinking about getting one, you're like, wow, what if it just dies? It happens. TCGs aren't an investment that you expect to get your full return on. They are a hobby that you play for a while, and there's no reason to think that a TCG is dead forever, and it can always live on in your heart or in the fan-run communities or just fan-run events or just playing with your friends. And there's always the chance it comes back better than ever in the future. And just take heart, take some time off if it dies, find a new game that you love, enjoy falling in love with a new game, like Jordan said, and just keep on enjoying the TCG hobby like we all do. So that's going to do it for this episode, guys. If you want to hear more, we are going to have an expanded episode going up as well. Link to that should be in the description. Our expanded episodes are Patreon only. It's only $2 a month. You get access to all of our expanded episodes plus other additional content. Tons of stuff's going to be going up there and behind the scene updates as well. So if you want to check that out, we of course really appreciate it. We have a great host of patrons who are going to be showing up here if you're on the YouTube video on the screen here shortly. And we are super appreciative. Thank you guys so much for all of your support so far. And we hope that some more of you guys check out our Patreon and enjoy listening to the content. And let us know if you have any feedback or anything you want to hear, anything you want to hear us talk about in a future episode. We have a big stock of topics, but we'd love to hear what you guys want to hear and include it. So that is it for this episode of the MetaManiacs Show, and hope to see you guys in the expanded episode. See ya.
See ya. Bye.